The autumn wind knifed down Michigan Avenue, rattling traffic lights and sending discarded leaves swirling into the air, like scraps of old memories. David Morgan adjusted the collar of his charcoal overcoat, the sharp air stinging his face as he kept his pace brisk. His mind was still tangled in the numbers from his morning meeting, projections and percentages marching through his head in perfect corporate order. But at his side, tethered to him by a small gloved hand, was the one thing in his life that refused to be reduced to numbers: his daughter Emma. "Daddy, slow down," she puffed, her short legs scrambling to keep up with his long strides. He glanced down and softened his pace, realizing he'd been walking as though chased by ghosts that had been trailing him for 6 years. Since Sarah, even now, part of him scanned crowds, absurdly hoping for a glimpse of her familiar smile. Wait. Emma suddenly stopped so abruptly he almost stumbled. Her eyes, a rare swirl of blue and green like the shallow edge of the ocean, had locked on something across the street. "Daddy, look." Following her gaze, David saw her, a young girl in a wheelchair, parked near the corner, bundled in a worn coat to sizes too big. A cardboard sign leaned against her knees, scrawled in shaky letters, "Please help. God bless." At first, she was just another child lost to the city's endless churn of need and neglect. But then David's breath caught. Even from this distance, something was wrong. Or maybe it was right, in a way that made his stomach turn. The girl's hair blonde, almost silver in the right light. Her face soft angles and a stubborn set to her mouth that reminded him of someone. Then he saw it. The eyes, those same impossible blue-green eyes that looked up at him every morning from Emma's face. "She looks just like me," Emma whispered, wonder threaded with certainty. Then, without hesitation, she declared, "That's my sister." The words struck him like a physical blow. "Emma," he began, but his voice failed. They crossed the street, his pulse pounding with a strange mix of dread and hope. The girl's gaze flicked up at them. In that single look, David saw something far older than her years of watchfulness, born of having to guard every scrap of herself. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, crouching so his eyes were level with hers. "Lily," she answered cautiously. "Lily Williams." The name detonated in his memory. Catherine Williams, Sarah's private nurse, the one who'd stayed after the funeral, who disappeared without explanation 8 years ago. "Where's your mother, Lily?" His voice came out lower than he intended, tight around the edges. "She died," Lily said simply, like stating the weather. 3 months ago. Pneumonia, they said." But she shrugged, the gesture heartbreakingly small. "We didn't have money for the medicine they wanted." Something shifted in David's chest. An old door, long locked, rattling on its hinges, because now, standing on this cold street corner, staring into those eyes, he began to suspect the impossible, and the impossible was staring right back. The city's lights bled into the night like streaks of molten gold. As David Morgan sat alone in his study, the wind clawing at the tall windows behind him, the encounter on that street corner refused to loosen its grip on his mind. Lily Williams. That name had dug its hooks deep into the locked archives of his memory, pulling forward fragments from a time he had deliberately buried, the raw aftermath of Sarah's death. He leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the unopened folder before him. His hand hovered over it, trembling ever so slightly. It wasn't fear of what he might find, it was fear that his gut already knew the truth, and the truth would demand something from him that he could never give back. The grandfather clock in the corner clicked toward midnight. He finally slid the file open, the scent of old paper and dust whispering of years wasted. The personnel section from his household records was a graveyard of names, but there she was, Catherine Williams. Termination date, 7 years, 9 months ago. Reason, inappropriate behavior and boundary violations. Signed by Rachel Winters, his executive assistant, the woman who had been his right hand during those blackout years, when grief and alcohol blurred the edges of everything. The words didn't sit right. Catherine had been careful, gentle, cautious to cross boundaries. He remembered Sarah once telling him, "She takes care of me as if I were her own sister." His phone buzzed against the desk, jolting him from the memory. Walter speaking, came the familiar voice, calm as always. "Walter," David said, trying to keep his tone level. "Do you remember Catherine Williams, Sarah's nurse?" A long pause. "Mr. Morgan, are you sure you want to dig into that? I need to know everything." Walter's sigh was heavy with the weight of withheld truths. She came to see you many times after her dismissal, sir. I saw her waiting outside the building in all kinds of weather. Rain, snow. Sometimes she had a baby with her. David's chest constricted. A baby, yes, sir. A little girl. Looked remarkably like Miss Emma. But Miss Winter, she made sure Catherine never reached you. Told her you didn't want any reminders of the past. Even had security escort her away once. David's hand slammed against the desk. The idea that for nearly 8 years his daughter, if she was his daughter, had been a few steps away. Denied entry by someone he trusted, clawed at him like a living thing. He ended the call with a clipped thank you and sat in silence, staring at the city skyline through the glass. Somewhere out there, in some forgotten corner of Chicago, was a child who might carry his blood and Sarah's smile. A child who had grown up without knowing him, not because he'd abandoned her, but because someone had stolen the chance before it even existed. The decision settled over him like a winter storm, cold, absolute, unstoppable. He grabbed his phone again. Walter, I need Catherine Williams's last known address, tonight. By the time Walter texted back with an address, the sky was already paling toward dawn. David shrugged into his coat, not waiting for the driver. Some answers you didn't send someone else to find. The streets grew narrower as he drove, the gleam of the city replaced by the weary slump of boarded windows and cracked sidewalks. This was a world away from his lakeshore mansion. Its quiet told stories of abandonment and survival. He parked outside a faded brick building with peeling paint and climbed the steps 2 at a time. An elderly Hispanic woman answered his knock, suspicion in her eyes until he spoke Catherine's name. Her face softened instantly. You must be him, she said quietly. Him, the father Catherine spoke of. The words landed like a strike to the chest. My name is Elena Martinez. Come inside. There's something I've been keeping for you. David stepped into her modest apartment. The air scented faintly of chamomile tea and old books. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a metal box, weatherproof and heavy. She said, if you ever came looking, I should give you this. He opened it with careful hands. Inside, he found a timeline of a life he'd missed, ultrasound images, a baby's hospital bracelet, snapshots of a girl with wild blonde hair growing taller in each frame, and at the bottom, a USB drive labeled in neat handwriting, for David. The truth about our daughter. When Elena's old laptop played the video, Catherine's face filled the screen, gaunt but defiant. Her voice cracked, but her eyes never wavered. If you're watching this, it means you finally found her. I never blamed you for not knowing. I tried everything to reach you, but your people kept me away. Her name is Lily. She has your mind, my stubbornness, and a smile that will undo you. Please, don't make me a liar. I told her you were a good man. The screen froze on her final, tired smile. Elena's voice broke the silence. Lily still goes to that street corner. Not to. Beg she hopes you'll come back. David closed the box, his grip firm, his course set. Then that's where I'll be. The morning broke gray and restless over Chicago. The clouds low and heavy as if the city itself were holding its breath. David had barely slept, replaying Catherine's trembling voice in that video over and over in his mind. Every syllable had carried a truth he couldn't escape, a daughter he'd never known, a promise he could no longer ignore. The metal box from Elena sat on the passenger seat beside him now, like a silent witness to what he was about to do. He parked a block, away from the corner, his instincts urging caution. This wasn't just about walking up to Lily and saying, I'm your father. She was a child forged by loss, a child whose trust was a locked door. One wrong move could slam it shut forever. He stood there for a moment, hands in his coat pockets, watching the flow of pedestrians. The air was colder here, sharper, as though the wind itself wanted to test him. Then he saw her. Lily was in the same place, the same oversized coat, her hair pulled into a loose braid that had frayed against the wind. Her small cardboard sign leaned against her lap. But she wasn't watching the passers-by like yesterday. She was scanning faces, searching. And then her eyes found his. It wasn't joy that crossed her face, it was something rawer, more guarded. Hope, maybe, but the kind that's afraid to breathe. She straightened in her chair, gripping the armrests like they anchored her to the earth. You came back, she whispered when he stopped in front of her. I told you I would, David said, crouching so he wouldn't tower over her. His pulse thundered in his ears. Lily, I want to ask you something important. Her eyes darted around, as though she needed to check for escape routes. What is it? Would you come with me? just for a while. Somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze flicking between his eyes as if searching for the catch. To your big house, she asked finally. Yes, you'd have your own room, good food. And he hesitated, swallowing. Emma's been talking about you nonstop. The corner of Lily's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it vanished. Quickly, what if you change your mind? Before David could answer, Elena stepped up beside him, her hand resting gently on Lily's shoulder. Mita, this is your father. Catherine always said he was a good man. Let him show you. Lily's voice was small, but it carried years of longing. You really think I'm your daughter? David didn't blink. I know you are, and I'm never going to let you be alone again. The drive back to the mansion was silent, but not tense. Lily kept her eyes on the window, watching the city transform into manicured streets and wide lawns. When they pulled into the circular driveway, she gasped. This is where my mom worked, she murmured. Yes, David said quietly. And now it's your home too. Emma burst through the front door, her hair flying. Daddy brought you home. She stopped just short of hugging Lily, as if sensing her need for space. But her smile was a bridge between them. Inside, the house felt different. Not because of its walls or furniture, but because David truly knew that this was the moment the past stopped owning him. But he also understood something else. Winning Lily's trust would not be a single act. It would be 1,000 small ones, every day, for as long as it took. And in that quiet realization, the real fight began. By the time the last streaks of daylight bled out of the Chicago sky, the Morgan mansion was awash in a quiet that felt almost ceremonial. But to Lily, the silence was something else entirely. It was the kind of quiet that pressed against your ribs, waiting for you to make a wrong move. David had shown her to a room that seemed plucked from the pages of a fairy tale catalog. A four-poster bed draped in pale linen, a window seat cushioned in soft pastels, shelves lined with books and toys chosen with the blind confidence of someone who thought comfort could be bought. Lily sat in the doorway, still in her wheelchair, her eyes darting from the chandelier to the velvet curtains, to the framed photograph of Sarah David's late wife smiling in sunlight. You can try the bed, David offered gently, standing just behind her. It's yours now. She didn't move. It's too big, she said finally. You can get lost in beds like that. Emma appeared, clutching a plate with 2 uneven slices of pizza. We were going to eat in the dining room, but I thought maybe here, she said, a little shyly. Lily's eyes softened just a fraction, and she took the plate. But instead of eating, she set it in her lap and stared at it, the cheese cooling. David noticed the way she positioned herself, wheelchair angled toward the door, ready to leave at a moment's notice. After dinner, he found her in the hallway, studying the family portraits. She pointed to one of Sarah holding a newborn Emma. She looked like me, Lily said, her voice so small it was almost stolen by the quiet. She looked like both of you, David replied, the words catching in his throat. Night came fast, and with it, the ghost Lily carried. At 2 a.m., David woke to the sound of muffled cries. He followed the noise to her room, where she sat upright in bed. She had moved herself from the wheelchair, clutching the blanket like a shield. It was raining, she said without looking at him. Mom was coughing so bad. I tried to get the neighbors to help, but nobody opened the door. Her breathing hitched. I thought if I could just keep her warm. David pulled a chair beside the bed, not touching her, just staying close. You don't have to tell me tonight, he said softly. You just have to know you're safe here. No one's turning you away again. She didn't answer, but when she finally lay down, she didn't turn her back to him. And before she drifted off, he heard her murmur something to faint to be certain. But it sounded like Daddy Dot. He stayed there until the first edge of dawn crept through the curtains, the weight of that single word settling on him heavier than any boardroom decision he'd ever made. Because in that moment, David understood, Lily's acceptance wouldn't come from grand gestures. It would come from being there, night after night, storm after storm, until she believed him. And somewhere in the distance, the storm was already building. The morning after that fragile truce between Lily and her new life, the first cracks appeared. David had been sipping coffee in the sunlit breakfast room where Walter entered, phone in hand, his expression grim. Without a word, he placed it on the table. On the screen was a news alert from the Chicago Herald. Millionaire David Morgan's secret daughter. Mystery girl in wheelchair sparks questions. David's blood iced. The photo was grainy, clearly taking the day he brought Lily home, but her face was unmistakable. The article speculated on everything: illegitimate child, hidden affair, questions about the late Sarah Morgan's marriage. They even mentioned Catherine by name, dredging up hospital records and rumors from years ago. His first thought was of Lily. She'd been through enough storms without the city's gossip columns turning her life into spectacle. He rose from the table, but before he could reach her room, he heard raised voices from upstairs. Emma's frantic and protective, Lily's sharp and defensive. He found them in the hallway, Emma holding a tablet. "They're saying awful things about you." "Lily, about Mom." "I don't care what they say," Lily snapped, but her trembling hands betrayed her. She pushed past both of them, retreating to her room and locking the door. David turned to Walter. "How did this leak?" Walter's hesitation was answer. Enough there was suspicion, and he didn't want to say it out loud. It had to come from inside. "Sir, someone close enough to know when you brought her here." Rachel Winters. The name rose unbidden, sharp as broken glass. She had the reach, the contacts, and after what he'd learned about Catherine-motive. By noon, the mansion gates were swarming with cameras. Walter kept them back, but the shouts carried over the walls. "Is Lily your daughter? Did you cheat on your wife? Why hide her?" Inside, the atmosphere thickened. Lily wouldn't come out, and Emma refused to leave her door. David's phone buzzed endlessly. Board members worried about the firm's image. Lawyers urging controlled statements. But all he could think about was Catherine's dying request. "Don't make me a liar. I told her you were a good man." As night fell, the storm outside the gates didn't fade, it grew. And then came the second blow, a text from an unknown number. "You want the truth to stay buried? Meet me tomorrow, alone, or the rest of the story goes public." Attached was a photo. Lily, no more than 3 years old, asleep on Catherine's lap in what looked like a hospital waiting room. David's chest constricted. Whoever sent it had more than gossip, they had history. He knew then this wasn't just about defending Lily from headlines. Someone was playing a game, and the stakes were far bigger than reputation. If he lost, he wouldn't just lose his name, he'd lose her. The next evening, the city was a tangle of restless light and long shadows, every street corner humming with winter's edge. David parked 3 blocks from the address in the text, a rundown warehouse on the south side where the wind cut like wire. The place was wrong in all the ways that told you someone wanted you off balance. He stepped inside, the metal door screeching against his frame. The air smelled of rust and stale cigarettes. At first, it looked empty, the kind of place where secrets went to rot. Then a voice floated out from the darkness. "You're late." Rachel Winters emerged from behind a row of steel shelving, dressed in a dark coat that seemed more like armor than clothing. Her hair was perfectly set, as though this meeting were just another boardroom ambush. "I knew it was you," David said, his voice low. "I doubt that," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "You always underestimated me, even after I kept this little complication away from your perfect life for almost 8 years." "You mean my daughter," David said, the word like a blade between them. Rachel's smile tightened. "Catherine was going to ruin you. Do you know what it would have done to the company, to your standing, if people thought you fathered a child with your wife's nurse while she was alive?" "I didn't," David said sharply. "Sarah and I." He stopped, the air shifting. Rachel's expression sharpened. "Didn't you ever wonder why Sarah trusted Catherine so much? Why she stayed even after her contract was up? There was more between them than you think." He felt the floor tilt under him. "What are you implying?" Rachel pulled a manila envelope from her coat. "Proof, letters, photos, things Catherine kept hidden. I can make sure no one sees them if you make sure Lily disappears from your life." The offer hit him like a physical blow, but behind her words, he heard something else: fear. If Rachel was trying to bargain, it meant she wasn't the one pulling all the strings. "Who's really behind this?" David asked. Her gaze flicked toward the shadows, and that's when he heard the slow, deliberate click of footsteps. Another figure emerged, tall, lean, and wearing a wool cap pulled low. He carried himself like a man who didn't need to explain his presence. "Evening, Mr. Morgan," the stranger said. His voice was smooth, almost polite. "I'm the one who's been keeping certain debts alive. Catherine owed me, and now Lily owes me, and by extension, so do you." The threat was quiet, but it rang louder than any headline. David realized then that this wasn't just about family secrets or reputation, it was about control. Whoever this man was, he had been in Catherine's orbit for years, feeding on her desperation. And now he had his sights on Lily. "You have something I want," the man continued, "and I have the power to make your life and hers very short if you refuse." Rachel shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't speak. The air between them was thick with a dangerous calculus. David knew this wasn't the kind of fight you won in one night. It was going to be a war, and the battlefield was going to be both public and deeply personal. And for the first time since finding Lily, he wasn't sure who was going to bleed first. Rain-slick streets shimmered under the glow of the sodium lamps as David left the warehouse, the stranger's warning still burning in his mind. Every instinct screamed that this was no longer just about reclaiming a daughter, it was about protecting her from something far darker than scandal. The night air tasted of metal and smoke, and somewhere in that darkness, he felt the weight of eyes following him. Back at the mansion, the storm outside the gates had quieted, but inside, tension hung like static before a lightning strike. Walter met him at the door with an envelope. "Courier dropped this off. No return address." Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance stills of Lily, playing in the yard, sitting at the kitchen table, sleeping in her bed. On the back of each, a single word written in block letters: payment. David's jaw tightened. This was no bluff. The man from the warehouse was staking his claim, marking Lily like property. But the final photo froze him. Catherine in a hospital bed, her face pale, but her eyes sharp, holding a newborn Lily, standing beside her Sarah. His mind reeled. Sarah knew. She'd been there when Lily was born. The question slammed into him. Had Sarah known Catherine's secret all along? Had she been protecting Lily from him or from someone else? That night, David tore through Sarah's old journals, which he'd locked away after her death. Buried between travel notes and personal musings, he found an entry dated 3 months before Lily's birth. "Catherine is terrified. She says the man she owes money to will take the baby if she can't pay. I promised her I'd help." David must never know, not yet, not until the danger passes. He wouldn't understand, and it would put him in their sights too. The handwriting shook on the page, as if Sarah herself had feared what might happen if this truth came to light. And then, in the margin, almost as an afterthought, "If anything happens to me, tell him the truth. Tell him Lily is his." The revelation was a knife to the heart. Sarah had known. She had tried to shield them both, and now, with her gone, the wolves had closed in. By morning, David had a plan. He called in every favor, every connection that a lifetime of building empires could buy. Private security would watch over Lily and Emma. Walter would dig into the stranger's identity, and David himself would go on the offensive. He arranged a second meeting not in some shadowed warehouse, but in a public place where the stranger couldn't disappear without being seen. When the man arrived, David slid the hospital photo across the table. "She's mine," David said evenly, "and the debt you think you own died with Catherine. You have nothing left to bargain with." The man's smile was cold. "You think this ends because you say so?" "No," David said, leaning forward. "It ends because I'll burn down everything you touch if you come near her again. And I don't make threats." For a long moment, the man studied him, weighing the truth in his voice. Then he stood and left without a word. David knew it wasn't over, not really. Men like that didn't walk away. But for now, the immediate danger had passed. And as he drove home, he realized something. Sarah had trusted him to finish what she started, to be the shield Lily needed. When he walked through the front door, Lily was on the couch, Emma beside her, their heads bent together over a book. Lily looked up, her guarded eyes meeting his for the first time. She didn't look away, and in that quiet moment, David understood the real victory wasn't in defeating the threats outside. It was in earning her trust, one day at a time, until she finally believed she was home.